Okay, you talked about your dad owning a hotel, but I remember him being a plumber. Tell us about that.
Well, uh, where I'm trying to, on the corner of Muskogee and 3rd Street, uh, Elting Streeter had a Streeter's Cleaners on that very corner, and at one point in time it became a bicycle shop. It's on the Muskogee, it's on the northwest corner of that intersection. Of course, the railroad tracks are just immediately to its east.
Mm-hmm.
If you went to the very back of that building, you'll see an archway with a 6-foot wide, 7-foot wide door. And for years, you could see Akin Bicycle Shop above it. When my dad was a sophomore in high school, he started a bicycle shop. And bicycles were a big thing. And push mowers, you know, we had the rotary wheel motors, you know, with the curved blades on it.
Oh, yeah.
He bought a machine back then that could sharpen those blades, which you needed it sharp.
And he was still in high school.
Yeah, yeah. And he played the basketball team. And used to be a pitcher in here of the basketball team. J.C. Cooper was one of the players on it. Dr. Cooper, the veterinarian here, was a classmate of his. And then his junior year, he just couldn't play basketball. He had so much work to do at his bicycle shop. And he would sleep there because at my granddad's house is full of kids and crying kids and everything. So the story is that my dad was a graduate of 1942 CA at Claremore High School. So on Sunday morning, he was down there sharpening lawnmower blades and fixing, you know, bicycles when they announced the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Okay. And then he joined and shipped out in September of 1942. And so he went to Great Britain with the 8th Air Force.
Now, when he joined, did he not have several classmates join the same day?
There was 7 of them.
7 of them.
Again, as my memory.
All Claremore grads.
All Claremore, of which Norman Lanto was a classmate of his.
All right.
And Norman was in that first group that went, I think, to Fort Sill. Could be corrected on that. But some of the names of the people. George Pritchard, also known as G. Pritchard, his dad, George, was in that group. Sam Webb, a longtime resident here, was in that group. Norman Lanto was in that group. And I can't remember the other 2, but again, in the Claremore Progress, that's been well noted.
Yeah.
And then from that, they all went different directions. And of course, Norman
went through boot camp probably together.
That's right, all the way through.
It was the Army, I believe, they joined.
Yes. Well, the boot camp was the Army.
Yeah.
But then if you joined the Army Air Corps at some point after you did your boot camp,
that's where your dad was at.
Yes.
And he went to England.
Yeah, via Spokane, Washington. And in Spokane, he bumped into a guy that was an OMA cadet. And I forgot the first name. His last name was Fox. Worked for the Tulsa Tribune after the war. Red Fox. No, that's a comedian. His last name was Fox, but when he's up in Spokane during his in processing, he's standing there and the sergeant, you know, when he was in processing, told him to sit down, and he's sitting there. And so the guy asked him, "Where are you from?" He said, "Claremore, Oklahoma." And he says, "Man, I was an OMA cadet." And they dawned on him that they knew each other, you know. But Fox was a little older, about 3 years. So they went to...
so 1,500 miles apart.
Yeah.
From being here, they meet
Correct.
each other.
So my dad went from Spokane. He did listing of maintenance on B-17s. So he got shipped to Great Britain, and I think they ported at Liverpool after a bombing. And I remember my dad telling me when they got off the troop transport, they were carrying everything on their back, and they were walking through Liverpool, and everything was on fire. And Raymond said, I remember reading Dante's Inferno. He said, then I'm thinking I'm living it, walking through there.
Mm-hmm.
And he wound up in around Ipswich in England in Parham 153 Bomber Base, which is hard to find because they don't list it as Parham 153. But I've been there.
You've been there.
Yeah, and then they were.
Was he able to go back with you, or just?
No, he went back quite a few times.
Oh, okay.
Never. I've been over 3 or 4 times, 5 times, but I never did one with my folks. But
Yeah. Okay.
and then they were married right there in that area.
Well, I was going to ask you, did not something happen pretty important to him while he was stationed over there?
He met my mom, and they were married, and I've got and he'll come to me what the name of the church was where, and I've been to that church where they were married. But yeah, and then he came back and was on a troop train going to Washington to form up with his bomber group to go to the South Pacific, and someplace in North Dakota the train stopped, and that was the end of the war in the Pacific.
So he'd served in Europe, and
then was in troop transport.
That's over, and they're getting ready to go ship him out to the South Pacific.
And then VJ Day hit, and I can't remember where he out-processed, but came home. Then my mother flew over about 3 or 4 months later.
Okay. So she'd stayed when he deported.
Yeah. Okay. He didn't know where he'd be.
Didn't know when they'd be back together, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So my mother was she became a citizen, I think, 3 years later. My mom took us to Great Britain when I was 4 or 5 years old to see, her folks, and went across the Atlantic on just a sort of a old, beat-up steamer, USS Georgic. But anyway, my mother's from Great Britain, and she was a war bride.
War bride.
Yeah, she was a nurse when my dad met her. So.
What else? Talk about being a plumber. How did your dad become a plumber? He had the bicycle shop. He's
well, my grandfather was a plumber.
Your grandfather was a plumber all this time?
Yeah.
Okay.
My grandfather was one of 8 kids, and his dad was an attorney, and his dad's name was Christopher Columbus Akin. And he's buried in Claremore. But he went by C.C. Akin. But his brother was America's Vespucci's Akin. The two known or attributed to the 2 people that discovered America. So I guess their dad, my great-great-grandfather, was Moses Akin, so he had sort of a flavor for history and first names. But my granddad came in here on the Frisco Railroad at 17.
Came to Claremore.
Yeah, in 1917, 1918. And he was 15, 16 years old at that time, finished the 9th grade, which was a typical thing back then. Mm-hmm. Finished the 8th or 9th. And when he got off the train, he was looking for a job the minute his feet hit the ground. And he looked across from the street, at Catty Corner was a Mason hotel annex buildings, and 3rd or 4th down there was a 2-ton truck there that my granddad thought, if he learned to drive that, because not all, knowing how to drive something in 1917, 18 wasn't like it is today, put it in D, drive and go. Mm-hmm. So when he went in that building to ask for a job, the guy there was a Cannonball Townsend. After a couple of years of that, Harry Cannonball got out of the business because he was just too old, and that's when my grandfather started his business, about 1920.
And how old would he have been then?
20. 02, so he'd been 18 or 19.
Okay, yeah.
But
very young still.
Yeah, but I think, you grew up fast.
Faster back then.
And
had to.
Food was hard to come by, and housing, and you either worked or you didn't, and developed a lot of character. But and my dad was born in 24, and my grandfather, I think that he married in 22. And it's interesting enough, my dad was born and died within 200 feet of the same place.
Same place.
Yeah. But anyway, that's how I got into plumbing, was through my grandfather.
Okay.
Now, prior to World War II, Raymond was the oldest of the kids. You know, I mean, he was August 4th birthday, so he didn't turn 18 until 6 or 7, 8, 9, 8 months before since the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And he had that bicycle shop and wasn't in the plumbing business. And I say he wasn't in it. Anytime they needed help, he helped. So he knew a lot more about plumbing, you know, just standing on the side of the ditch or in the ditch, one of the two, you know, all the time. So they all knew something. And my Uncle Kendall was a plumber. And the rest of them sought out professional lives,
Okay.
different venues to make a living. But that's how we became into plumbing. It was my grandfather and then Raymond and then me.